during the session. Yeah, that's it. That's it. So yeah, so since we will be discussing about hypergrowth and a customer success. So before we do that, I'd like also first to ask Bradley, since you have been into a company, um, helping them to grow their business in a hypergrowth phase. Could you help us understand what is a hypergrowth company is, what it does, what its makeup, and then eventually if you could be able to share some misconceptions or myths about driving success at a hypergrowth company?
Absolutely. Probably a good way for us to start thinking about what's a hypergrowth. There's a terminology that at least at MaintainX we use it a lot, but something you can Google it. It's called triple, triple, double, double, double. So what that really means is for a company, when they reach that product market fit at 1 million mark, they sort of triple their revenue by year 1, triple again by year 2. So 1 to about 3.5 to 4, then to 12, 15 million, right? You triple again, and then you double that, then double that, then double that, and get to 100 million ARR within 5 years from the moment you hit your product market fit to getting to 100 million. There's sort of a standard industry terminology, and that's sort of how I would define a hypergrowth, which is you sort of have a hockey stick up in there.
Yeah, this is the first time I heard about triple, triple, double, double. I'm thinking about the Mac Burger. I have this in the mouth.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for that. So when a certain organizations are trying to grow the business, it also includes about structuring the business, and at the same time looking at what are those key principal strategies that makes up hypergrowth. Sandy, I'd like to hear your thoughts about what are the key strategies you think a hypergrowth company should consider, and at the same time, it will also consider about the customer experience and then customer success, and how do you think it should develop over time?
Yeah, thank you for that, Vincent. I think there's a lot of things that you have to consider because you're growing so rapidly, and you have to first think about what is the goal that you're trying to accomplish. Are we trying to get product market fit first? Are we trying to grow specific segmentation? And then, so depending on what the goal is, mostly for everybody is to grow the NRR, but I think that's too broad. I think when you're trying to think about your goals, it's very important to have different pillars of growth and then focusing on each one of them. So if we think about customer success, so you started with one, maybe it was even not a CSM, right? Maybe you were thinking about your first hire, and then you're thinking about you have to think about your business and what is the business trying to do before you hire the CSM. Because you can have a CSM that's very good at one-to-many. I don't even want to use like high touch, low touch, like all that, right? Like it's really, is it one-to-many? Or you really focus on really just the largest customers? Like you have to take a look at your customer base and what is the right CSM model for that. So I feel like I think a lot of companies in the hypergrowth stage, they make these decisions too quickly. They're like, oh, I know eventually we're going to have 100 customers, so we need a CSM for the scale, for one-to-many. But you have to take a look at what is the current growth rate? How quickly are you acquiring customers? Is that what you need? Or do you, because maybe at that stage, what you really need is a CSM that really knows how to, do the white glove service and actually start to build communities. So as you add more customers, then they can start joining the community, and then you can perhaps delay when you need to addition and grow your CS team. Does that answer your question, Vincent?
It does. It does. Yeah. So, Brady, I'd like also to get your ideas, because each business is unique, and each solution is also unique. Say, for instance, from SMB to mid market to an enterprise customers. So, can you give us about how would you design that balance in terms of orchestrating customer journey from end to end, if you're looking for the perfect strategies complementing what you're currently doing?
So I think from constructing the customer journey and Funny enough that I joined MaintainX about 4 months ago, and that's the first thing I did at the company. My recommendation to everyone is don't do it yourself. Because customer journey goes end to end from sales, marketing, product touch point, all the way to when sales close a deal, you sort of have your implementation, onboarding team to maybe account management, CSM to support. I typically start with sort of interviewing people. I know it sounds easy, but one mistake that I often see people do when they join and start building out is they start to map things out based on imagination. That's bad. That's very bad, because number one, no one will buy into that. And number two, no one cares what's on a PowerPoint if it's not real, right? And you see that probably a lot with the executive coming in and say, that's our customer journey. And your account manager or CSM is like, that's not our customer journey at all. So first step and first recommendation, sort of a best practice / playbook, is talk to all the leaders in different departments. If you can have them all together into a meeting together, that's even better. Map things out based on what's real. And after you have done that, preset it, have a buy-in to everyone on, is this the actual customer journey we get? Do we agree, right? From implementation, from sales, etc. Then you drill down into what's the part that we can optimize. Is there a gap? And I guarantee you that a lot of time when you present that, different leader will be like, oh, I didn't know that. Right? You could have a sales leader saying, oh, I didn't know that when we hand it off, there's 3 things that get fallen apart or fall to a crack, right? So when we have the holistic view by the leaders that's validated, that's the reality, doesn't matter it's good or bad, then we start to think about, okay, what can we do from there, and what's our dream customer journey? What's the most ideal streamlined journey? Now we look at the mismatch, and that's map out OKRs, projects, etc., to say what can we do from there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Bradley, that alignment of the customer journey from the cross function is so critical, because everyone have a different idea of what that journey is. One thing I will add to that is that the journey should not be inside out. The journey should be outside
100%.
in, right? You need to look at the journey from your customer's experience. And the team, my team at Oracle, that's what we did. We actually went and looked at, we were a marketing automation tool. So we helped our clients look at what is their customer's experience. So for you as a CSM, it's very important for you to either have a customer or even someone else, right? To pretend to be your customer. How did they first get to know you? What is your onboarding experience like? Like we never experience what our customer experience, and that's the journey you want to document. That's the journey you want to optimize. What is the customer experiencing? So from the outside in.
Yep.
Right. Thanks, Brady. Thanks, Sandy. Yeah, I think most of the organization right now are trying to design customer journey based on their perspective. But if you have to have an outside in, that's we could be able to see the importance of where the customers are and where they're at, and how we could be able to help them support them to achieve their goal, if you will. Now, speaking of the customer journey, and I could also tie this to the customer, to the business process. So once the business grows and they reach a certain peak of growth, if you will, sometimes they lose touch of their customer. Now, my question is going to be is, how does the customer feedback play in shaping the company's growth, and how it could also help develop your right customer success initiative to focus on? I'll give that to you, Sandy.
Yeah, I think that that's an area of my passion, right? Really gathering customer data. I think first thing that people go to is, let's do a survey, right? So I think survey is a great source of data, but you have to take a look at who's actually answering the surveys. Are you looking for information from the executive buyers? Are you looking for people that are actually using your tools? They're both important, but you can't mix match, right? Because the questions are going to be different. So survey is definitely one source of information, but I think the customers are always giving you information about how they feel about your product and what their experience is. So support tickets is a great source of data that people often overlook. right? Because they're telling you what's not working. And from that, you can say, oh, we need to do better education. We need to do better onboarding, or maybe we need to actually set better expectations. And sometimes support is actually a source of product enhancements as well. And so, I mean, those are like two big areas. And another thing is, if your company records calls with the customers on the sales side, I would really recommend that the CS leaders and the CS practitioners go and listen to some of those calls. Listen to some how your salespeople are positioning. Listen to the type of questions that your customers are asking, because when they sign up with you, that's what they're going to expect to get, right? And so you already know some of the expectations that they have, some of the hopes and dreams that they have for investing in your product. So I think that customer data is everywhere. But one final thing, and I'll pass it on to Bradley, is that don't be afraid to talk to your customers. They're very busy building their business. I feel like a lot of teams are like, oh, I don't want to bother the customers. You're not bothering them. You're trying to help them be successful, right? It's what is your intention? You're not just say, well, let me make sure you come to my QBR, or let me make sure you like my post or whatever, right? You want to talk to them from the point of view is that, how do I make it easier for you to work with me, right? I think a big complaint from customers is that it's too hard for me to tell you how to help me, right? It's our job as a CS leaders, as the whole organization, to make it easier for us, for our customers to work with us. So those things, surveys, tech support tickets, listen to calls, and don't be afraid to talk to customers. Bradley, what are your thoughts?
Fully agree. I think that one's spot on. One thing I'll say, so prior to my startup life, I was at SAP for 5 years. I like to say for enterprise, or when you're large, you usually have a lot of programs. But what I found, just transparently, sometimes people my product manager doesn't care. So doesn't care about that. But that being said, though, there's already product market fit or things getting established, so they have their vision on what's the next set. On the flip side, if anyone here is working at a Series A or Series B stage startup, customer feedback is everything. You don't listen, your company gonna die. I mean, like, you raise a Series A or B, you got what, 18 months, 24 months to 36 months to be alive. Your customer feedback is probably one of the most important way for you to adjust your product roadmap, your customer experience team's operation, your engagement model in there. Now, the benefit for startup is it's quite easy to get customer feedback, because you typically won't have tons and tons and tons of customer. But the three things that I usually like to suggest, and again, agree with Sandy, but number one was sort of reviewing, but thinking about sort of a customer product feedback forum to be set it up, whether it's public facing or internally have a mechanism in there. I see people oftentimes do it a little bit too late. They just select a product manager and say, hey, I need this, right? And that's usually too late. And product manager's like, I have no clue. Is that important? Is that going to impact 20% of my revenue, or just one customer out of 4,000? Establish that voice of the customer back to the product team into a formalized way as early as possible will really benefit your company for the growth. The second one is the sort of a customer advisory committee. And again, for the very early stages company, I would say even pre-Series D, so A, B, and C, think about who are your ideal customer profile. Think about your enterprise segment, who are the top 10 or 15 that really should have a voice to your product roadmap. They really should have a voice to how you as a CSM design your engagement. So again, voice of customer is everything, but streamlining to product and also that committee advocacy, probably a little bit too early if you want to do a big community of all your customer, because it's a lot of manpower to do. And CSM have 5 jobs to do already. You don't need the 6th job to give it to your CSM. But customer committee in their customer advocacy advisory board, that's usually pretty easy to build in the early stages. And they will also train your team to have that muscle to listen to your customer. Or you're dying. So
Yeah,
one
those
way or
are
the
your
other.
options.
Or
Do
you're
or
dying.
die.
Yeah, because if we don't incorporate customer voice into what we're doing, we're not going to innovate, right? So some innovations actually come from the customers since they're the one using our product day in and out. And sometimes when our use cases, when they started buying our product or services, they do that one particular use cases, but once they grow and the business grows, sometimes we overgrown that kind of use case. Thanks for sharing that. I'm
Before
also
we move on, there's actually a question from chat. I think, Jeanette, you had a question. Can you get off mute and speak more about
Yeah.
your question? Oh, your audio is not going really well. Can you get closer to your microphone? Yeah, we can't hear you, but the question that she had is on chat, Bradley. I think her question is really around like when and how do you know? What is the evaluation? Vachas, can you repeat her question? How often do companies evaluate internal feedback around customer concerns and viewpoints and align them with actual voice of the customer? Jeanette, we're really having a hard time hearing you. So I'm going to ask you to stay on mute, and then Bradley can answer. Yeah, because sorry, we can't hear you. The audio is not working well. Go ahead, Bradley.
Yeah, okay. Monthly or quarterly. I think depending on the size of your engineering team, your R&D, your product manager. But I would say at least on my end, oftentimes it's a monthly engagement. Now, when you say company, how often do they evaluate internal feedback? I think CSM will evaluate every day because you hear that every day. Your onboarding team, your implementation team, your account manager will hear that every day. But how do you consolidate all of that back to the product team? I typically find monthly is a good cadence to feed it back. And also depending on for your engineering team, R&D, do you have a monthly release, quarterly release, etc. Right? So if monthly is too costly for the product team, then you do quarterly. But what I found was whenever I proposed that to product manager, they love it. They want to meet with us quite often.
Yeah, and I would say like the foundation is to make sure you do it, right? I feel like the big part that people miss is that they actually don't evaluate the feedback around the customers. And that what Bradley said earlier about that cross-functional alignment is key. So an easy way that we did is just start by having a summit, right? So it's not a quarterly readout of what my team did. It's actually quarter readout of what my customer said. And so that would be a good way for you to just start having that. And another thing that Bradley said I really like is start building the muscles around working together to listen to the customer, because it's like, blind people touching the elephant, right? We're all touching different parts of the elephant. And so it's good to get together so that we can see the synergies as well. Vincent, back to you.
Yeah, I'm actually reading one of the notes there, but yeah, 100%. We need to make sure that just like what Brady says, and I would concur in that at least bi-weekly. In my previous organization, that's what we do. We do internal meetings across stakeholders. As much as possible, we address some outstanding layers that we have, especially if this is gonna be coming from the customers. All right, so Brady, I'm keen to get your idea because as our customer grows, their use case changes, and at the same time, it also impacts the customer success and at the same time the customer experience. Sometimes we have also global customers. My question is going to be is for a hyper growth company, how do you ensure consistency that we deliver both?
Just to repeat that question real quick, in a hypergrowth company, how do we have that? How do we keep that same customer experience, the consistency across
Yes.
different teams as we scale the team? Okay. I'll probably use the example that I had at Deal. When I was at Deal, I was the first of customer success to build a global team. So I hired. I was building 4 teams all at once: the North America CSM team, the Latin America CSM team, the Europe CSM team, and the APAC CSM team. One big lesson I learned, and here's something I love to share, is if you hire someone who's bad, doesn't matter how much you have your playbook or your team culture or your team vision or your SOP, there will be a drop off with experience. What I found the most beneficial, most important way as you hyper grow and scale was when you're doing a hyper growth, the most stressful thing is about hiring, because you have to hire at Deal. I think I have to hire 15 people in a month just for CSMs, because it's like 4, 4, 4, 4. It's easy for us as leader to sort of just say, okay, I'm just going to hire anyone who feels good, because I'm so tired of interviewing people.
Yeah.
The moment you lower the bar, that's the moment that there is going to be inconsistency in your customer experience delivery. And the best company that you see are the one that hire great leader that had the same culture, that had the same high expectation of their team. And then those people get maybe promoted to a manager one day, and they still keep hiring the same type of people. So I would say from process-wise, it's fairly easy to have a process to say everyone should do the same thing and with the same KPI and the same OKR. But the fact is, people is the hardest and the most complicated variable in your customer experience delivery. And how do you make that consistency is through a hiring process that's vetted, that was being reviewed heavily, and making sure that you sort of hire the right people, the right leader, the right manager, the right director to do the job.
Yeah, I totally agree with Bradley about having that consistency in terms of hiring. But I think as a company, as a CS leader, you really need to actually document your processes, right? I think that the onboarding process sometimes gets missed. You hire, you see you nodding, right? Like you hire someone, you think it's great, and they are great, but they don't know your processes. And in that process, in the onboarding, it's also expectations, right? And then don't just put expectations in terms of how to do the work. It's the expectations of your, what's the word? Your values, right? Like, what are we trying to do here? What is our values when it comes to dealing and handling customers? And what is our values as we support you as leaders, you know, as a CSM? You know, do we expect you to work 24/7? Like, I mean, with the global, it's very easy to slip into that. So as I manage global teams, I'm very mindful of the time where we meet, right? Like, so I don't make my team always meet when it's convenient for me, right? And it's reasonable to switch. And as the team grows wider, right? Like Bradley's case, he has all four regions. Like, what is the best time, right? So just actually that little things, being mindful, it really helps people in other regions, right? The US region is going to be predominant, right? Like, and people always like, they don't even think about, you know, the time zone factor, right? Like, oh, it's okay, it's 7 p.m. after their workday. Yeah, 7 p.m. they have a life. They're humans first, right? They may want to eat dinner or be with their families or go play tennis, like what I like to do. So I think to have that consistency, you have to document, but also be mindful of the time differences and differences in the culture as well. Vincent, I know you have something to say about that.
Yeah. Majority of the customer that I supported before. So I was a strategic CSM for Okta, and then majority of our customers is actually in different kind of vertical. And then one thing that we develop in terms, or one thing that we would like to implement in terms of consistency is, it's like what you said, we document all of our processes. Because once the customers, let's say from commercial to for enterprise to from commercial, strategic up until they become strategic customers for us. We have a different playbook that we execute. We want to make sure that we don't drop the ball and the customer experience become disjointed if we are going to reinvent the wheel in the process or something in the process that we would like our customers across to feel. And yeah, there's a questions on the chat that I'd like also to share because I think this is also relevant, especially if you're a customer success, regardless whether you are handling SMB, mid-market, or enterprise. The question is going to be is I'd like to ask this both for you, Sandy and Bradley. In terms of the tools a customer success should use, do they have? What do you think should be the standard tools they should use in terms of engagement, looking at their book of business, and then what's going to be the data routine for the customer success or customer success manager?
Those are big questions, I think. Let's break it up. Let's talk about tools first. Bradley, you've been in a lot of different companies. What are the tools that you like to use?
Depends on the style of your CSM. Now, I'm going to take a step back and just answer on that big part. When you say CSM, I see three types of CSMs. First type was CSM who also owns onboarding, usually for smaller software where your CSM is both the customer success manager, but also the onboarding person. So after the customer bought it, they onboard them and keep that relationship, right? Second type of CSM I've seen was they don't own onboarding, but they own everything else. So they take over after customer go live. So at Lever, that was my CSM model, right? Renewal, expansion, adoption, but not implementation versus my CSM I built at Densify owns onboarding. The third type of CSM was the CSM who doesn't own implementation, but there's also account manager owning upsell renewal. So they're really focusing on the middle part, which is your life cycle, adoption, value realization. That was the model. At SAP, there's a model sort of that I'm building here at MaintainX for CSMs. Now, answer the question on that. Number one, depending on the role that your CSM have, before you make a decision on has to be Gainsight, has to be client success, has to be Vitally, has to be Catalyst, right? There's names out there, but think about the role of your CSM, because I'm going to argue that every CSM at every company is so different to a point that you should really first understanding what's expectation of that role. And then based on that, what are the tech that can really make a difference? Now, if your question is like, I don't have a CRM, I can't even see my customer data, then yeah, get a CRM, you need to see customer data. If your question is like, oh, I don't have a way to mass email the customer, right? Whether it's an outreach or whatever tool, or I don't have a tool to record the customer call so I can review it, then yes, get Gong, get Chorus. Like to me though, that was more day-to-day things that people need to be efficient. But once you have that fundamental thing done, right? Customer call recording, the email tool that you have, the customer database that you can see, then think about based on the role and the day-to-day, what technology can move the needle for you? Now, that could be a project management software because your customer spends 60% of the time on onboarding, and Salesforce is bad for managing that, and you just get a Trello or Jira or Kanban board, but there's a million other tools better than that. It could be on the renewal side, you want to see the customer health, right? And then that's the time maybe looking at more of a customer success platform. I implemented Gainsight, I've done hacking with the Salesforce, I implemented Catalyst. So a couple of tools I've done before. Those are the one really focusing customer health. And then of course, renewal, there's different playbook or software that you can do as well. But long answer short, make sure you give your CSM the fundamental tools they need to do their job, and then really dive into the role itself before you make a decision on what tool, standard tool that you should be using. But we can take this offline because there's tons of tool, and Vincent can also talk about AppEQ, right? There's another tool there, so depending on the need. Cindy? You're on mute, you're on mute. There you go.
Oh my God, rookie mistake. I was going to say, Bradley just named off like 20 different tools, right? So Vincent, can you tell us just very briefly about AppEQ? Like, why is that? Like, who needs another tool? What is AppEQ?
Yeah, so AppEQ provides insights to the customers if they're looking for if they're looking for informations scattered all across the data sources that we have. Could be CRM, could be technical, it could be your product support. AppEQ would be able to give you those information right at the get-go. So if you go to your email inbox, you will be able to see those informations, and they categorize those according to how do you set up your business needs, if you will. And then if you would like also to see if you are a CSM, and then if you would like to know what's happening to your book of business right from the renewal conversations up until developing your opportunity, that's where AppEQ gives the better sense of helping you as a customer success manager to give better sense of your book of business, especially if you're handling a long field account.
Yeah, I'm glad you share that. And I'll tell you why I specifically asked Vincent, because there are a lot of tools like AppEQ and AppEQ itself that actually help you get more value from the tools that you already invest in, right? So you have a support system, you have a CRM, whatever it is, it's really helpful for tools like AppEQ that actually help you see it without buying more licenses. And hypergrowth, every dollar counts, right? So you may not want to invest more licenses of Zendesk just so that your salespeople and your CS people can actually see that information. You may not want to invest in more licenses. So look for those tools that can actually help you, that can help you get more data across the silos. That would be my recommendation. And then one final thing is, it really takes a lot of introspection to know what are the motions that's actually taking up most of your time, right? You have to slow down and make an investment to say, how are my CS people spending my time? How are my support people spending my time? How are my salespeople spending their time, right? And then you've been doing it, like, do they spend most time in spreadsheets? Do they spend most time in, project management tools? Whatever that is, then you can say, if we got a tool like this, it will save everybody like 30% of the time. That can free up 30% of their time. So look for repetitive things, mundane things that you need to do, then decide on a tool. Go without, but the introspection is really important.
I agree on that, Sandy. When I working with the previous organizations, we want to make sure that we don't automate all of the things that we're doing just for the sake of automation. We want to understand why we're using a certain tools or tech stack for the business, especially for the customers who are very, what I call a white glove customers. So most of the time we spend gathering data, analytics, and understanding the use case and the product use of the customer. So there are a lot of tools that the customer success should have, but I think the most primary one is your CRM. If you don't have the budget to go with customer success tools, sometimes when I work with HubSpot before, we do use HubSpot as our project management tool. We try to collect all this data put together because we don't want to spend, but there are so many tools, and we cannot say there's standard one, but you could be able to. But the reason is you have to know why you're going to use a certain tool and how it will impact the customer over time. All right, so.
Vincent, we actually have 2 more questions on the chat, and I'd like for us to make sure we answer those first. I think there's one from 02276, and Vacha said another one.
Okay. Okay, let me read the questions to both Sandy and Bradley.
Yeah.
So for early stage company that is growing into the workspace management solution, what should be the roadmap for effective customer success when still you don't have clients onboarded and are still on the average of acquiring customers? That's a good question.
Yeah, so that question is for me. I'll introduce myself. My name is Arun. I work for Yearspace. I'm based out of India. So I have this question because we're on the verge of acquiring customers. So what should be the effective CS processes and what would be the roadmap for the same? So quite quick about this question because I'm dealing with new customers. I'm trying to set these processes right here about the onboarding and the customer journey and the personas. So if you could shed some light on this, it'll be great.
Yeah, I can probably take this one. And again, Shuri on this part. The last company that I joined before MaintainX, it's the company's called Acquire App. It's a C-stage company. And I was recruited as a CS leader without customer. So exactly the same shoes. Now, I will probably challenge on the concept of customer success and correlating that into just purely post-sales. Okay, so that's the first thing that I want to challenge everyone here. Typically, when you say customer success, it's post-sales, right? After the sales motion. When I was at Acquire App, I actually map out not only, well, again, there's no customers, so I do have to imagine on what engagement is, but I actually map it all the way to the pre-sale side to support my AEs, my sales. So we got one salesperson and I'm the post-sales leader, but I'm working a lot with the sales side because for a lot of customer, number one, they care about if I'm going to buy this from you and you're a brand new company, I'm your first customer, like, am I going to get the support I need? Okay. And number two was a lot of time they want to see the person who's on the post-sale side so they know it's not a scam. There are times when you get a software and there's no one else after that. So the first thing I'll do is I'll still think about customer journey, but I'll actually start mapping from the moment the AE start talking to the customer. Do they get onboarded at that stage? Now, Acquire App, we actually onboard the customer before they pay because we do have a free trial period to let them use it. And the CSM that I hired, or sort of the plan that I created, strategy I created, was having CSM playing almost like a pre-sales person. So customers start the free trial or start the trial with you. AE, they know that this is a sales guy. But then the salesperson can say, hey, I got Bradley, who's here, really our customer success manager, to help you get the most value out of our software. That is customer success. Now, if that happens pre or post sales, it actually doesn't matter because customer want to get value. Now, that's my short or long answer to your short question on what should you do is to me, sales is still part of customer success. As long as customer touch your software, they need to get value from your software. And that's when you can start working on what are the pre-sales activity to even help sales to convert, because customer get value, they'll buy, they'll renew, they'll buy more.
Yeah, I completely agree. Go ahead. What do you think?
That's right. Thank you so much for this. But there's still customers coming on this pipeline. So I'm dealing here in bits and pieces with customers here. I work with the product team. I work with the marketing team. I work on G2 reviews. I work on the FAQ. It's quite like the role is multifaceted at the moment. So how do I prioritize this and I strategize this in a single direction, making that I have set goals and parameters that I go and head towards the what direction? I would like some advisory on this.
Okay. Cindy can definitely chime in. I will sort of explain on what I map out on the roadmap of CSM evolution. C stage, jack of all trade. You're like part-time product manager, part-time customer support, part-time customer marketing, part-time customer adoption, product coach. And that's normal. That's okay. I would say looking at from the customer journey perspective, what is the most important one for your company and your software for you to focus on? End of the day, you'll probably hire many different people who does each of those jobs. But before you have people there, you will do everything, but potentially you should come up with the next 2 quarters, if we grow and hit 100 customers, I need someone to do support. I need someone to do customer marketing, or maybe it's only until Series A that we get customer marketing. Before that, we don't worry about customer marketing, right? One advice I'll give to you though is, even though you're a jack of all trades, hire someone up in operation early. the biggest lesson I learned is you wait for so long to hire a operation person. And yes, it's hard to justify, right? Because he doesn't code, he doesn't sell, he doesn't support customer. Then do we need that? My answer is yes, because anyone who can do, whether it's revenue operation, customer operation, sales operation, etc., usually those are the people that will start build up process and system to help your job to be more efficient before you spend a lot of money to hire more people. So that's my short advice. Cindy?
Yeah, thank you, Bradley. I love that advice that with the ops, that is so true because we're just talking about data, right? It's like where are you going to do data? How are you going to visualize that data? How do you make sure different systems talk to each other? The ops person is key for that. But specifically to what do you prioritize? I think that's just something that CS organizations in general always have to struggle with. So it's not just a hyper stage, but it's because we're the catch-all, right? Oh, why don't you send this to the marketing? Why don't you write this case study? Right? We're a catch-all. So I would say prioritize given where you are right now. Make that list of all the things you're doing, and then get your executives involved to say, hey, I'm doing 12 things. I think these top 3 are going to get us to most likely going to help us get our first customers. So I'm going to prioritize that. And that means I'm going to let go of the next 9. Or I don't, my math is not right, but you know what I mean, right? So the way to prioritize, get feedback, right? Not from the cross-functional, but from the leadership team, and give them a perspective. It's not like, oh, you help me pick, right? Because you have a perspective, what you think is actually going to get our customers faster. Is it G2 reviews? Is it a adoption journey? Like, what do you think personally is going to help us get the customers in faster? And then say, these are things I would like to prioritize. What are your thoughts? And that way you can make sure you're always aligned with the executives.
Yeah. So one last question.
Sorry, I think we have to move on, but feel free to reach out to Bradley and I to, if you have additional questions, because we have like 10 minutes left. So I want to make sure we get back on track with Vincent. But thank you very much for that interesting question.
So I'm so sorry about that. One last question before I close out. I have a question that you told that you need to hire an operations guy. So do you think should bring in a couple of folks for the CS team, or ops guy would suffice the requirement at this present scenario, as Bradley mentioned in this note? So that would do, is my question. Okay. Thanks a lot. Fair enough. Please go ahead. I'm so sorry for the interruption.
No, you're good. You want to take it, Bradley?
Yeah. My short answer is I don't like to give people an answer on this because I don't know the company. I would say that's connect offline. Add me on LinkedIn. You probably got my email from the Zoom as well as connect, because love to talk a bit more deeper than just a shallow answer on yes or no based on I have zero context. So that's what I recommended. And yeah.
Sure thing. I'll drop you a line. Yeah, sure.
Awesome.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for that questions. Yeah, there's another question I'd like also to share that's being asked. So let's cover the next questions. You two could take the question if you will. The question is, I would love to hear more about how to take the stream of customer feedback and make clear that what is truly important. I've seen folks over-rotate on a single customer interaction and would like to hear how to manage that. Sandy, I think you said something about this earlier.
Yes, absolutely. So I think this is the work that we have to do, right? So the loudest customer, it may not be our ICP, may not be our ideal customer, right? Especially a hyper growth, you get any customer that will pay us is great. But eventually, as you mature as an organization, you really have to think about, is that the right profile? The person that's screaming the loudest, are they having the problems that we are trying to solve, right? So your question specifically, take the stream of customer feedback and make it clear and what's truly important. It's important for you to know what is the product meant to do, right? So it's very natural for people to want to, for you to start, especially in hypergrowth, like, oh, I want you to do this, I want you to do that. But you have to remember, you're not a customer software shop, right? So you have to prioritize for the customers that are actually the ones you're trying to get more of. And how do you know which of the type of customer you're trying to get more of? Work with product, right? So as you're in hyper growth stage, it's very common, like you just get any customer. You're just so happy to have revenue, right? But as you need to prioritize the feedback based on what you're trying to accomplish, which is get more customers that are like the ones that we want to use our product. Bradley, anything else to add to that?
That's perfect answer.
Thank you. All right, Vincent, back to you.
Okay. Thanks, Andy. But Bradley, I'd like to ask this questions to you because when we once the organization grows, changing roles happen, swap of responsibilities do occur, and sometimes there's also movement across the organization, upward and downward. I'd like to know, with your experience, how do you ensure that the customer success team stays agile and adaptable in a fast-paced hypergrowth phase?
Yeah, good question on that part. My short answer is whatever responsibility of your CSM team is right now, if you're in a hypergrowth company, will change very likely every 6 months. If you are a leader in a hypergrowth company, always think about sort of roadmap of your team, making sure that the people you hire, the people you manage, people that you're developing, they see the vision and then develop accordingly. Now, what I mean by that is you started probably with a CSM, whether you call it CSM or account manager in the very early stage, does everything, right? Then you start to split into, okay, I need segmentation, enterprise, mid-market, SMB, typical. Then you start to split into customer journey-wise, you have that onboarding implementation to go live to really using it to like renew expansion. So if you think about the natural progression of a customer, typically what you want was a CSM team that ultimately will evolve to each different bucket, right? Remember I just talked about that renewal, regular adoption, and then onboarding, enterprise, mid-market, SMB.
Yeah.
It's almost like a grid of that 9 little grid. And you think about what you approach those individually. And then you evolve your team and you prep your team. So example would be onboarding for SMB, right? Bottom left, think about that grid. You cannot afford to keep hiring CSM to do it. You're probably going to have an onboarding team, but you can, I guess, recruit 20 or 50 implementation specialists. So maybe that's a digital onboarding program that you hire a digital or customer education that at MaintainX we just hired to build this, versus the mid-market versus the enterprise. Enterprise, maybe you split into enterprise onboarding implementation, you need a project manager plus implementation. So it's not just a CSM. So the leader has to envision early, ultimately, what are the touch point of that little grid that I just say. And again, if you keep evolving, it'll be even more complicated. It would be a grid of 16, 4x4, because different stages, even more segmentation. And then prepare your team to be agile enough to say, we're jack of all trades right now, but in a year, yes, we need specialized. Now, Vincent, I would like you to, I see you having the talent to be an enterprise CSM, managing the client, but probably not renewal. I am going to develop you into this type of role, versus someone who's so good at webinar, loves to present in a webinar, then probably the self-onboarding, right? You do an office hour or onboarding, that person may be a perfect one-to-many CSM or one-to-many onboarding specialist. So that's how I approach being agile, because telling people change is coming is hard. Give them the vision of that, map out the roadmap of that, and then develop people into that, and that will be the key. Cindy?
Yeah, I love that leadership approach, Bradley. And I think as you're starting to hire more in your company in the growth stage, it's more, I personally believe it's more important to hire the person as opposed to their specific experience. right? Because maybe this person has total growth mindset, really into learning, but they were a teacher in the past, right? Don't rule out people just because they don't have the specific. It's hard because, you know, you want some proof, but I think when you're hire, really, you know, put weight into the person's aptitude, capability, and the mindset, because those are the people that can be agile and pivot, and they won't be upset when you move their cheese, right? They'll be like, oh gosh, you know, you hired me here to be sales. I don't know anything about post sales, as opposed to, oh, okay, I was sales. Let me expand into post sales. So people that want to learn, people want to grow, those are the people you want to hire.
Got it. All right. So Sandy, Bradley, really appreciate your time. We're almost at the bottom of the hour. So before we wrap this up, any last word, Bradley, Sandy, to the audience?
Brad, you go first.
I can start. Smile more. CSM is hard. Hyper growth is hard. If you're in startup or you're in a big company, just tell yourself that it's gonna be fine. It's not end of the world. Enjoy your interaction with your team. Enjoy your interaction with your customer. Keep smiling and keep learning.
Those are
Sandy?
great tips. And I think a lot of CSMs and hyper growth companies feel like they need to know more. They need to learn more, right? I would have to say, have confidence in what you already know, and definitely continue to have that growth mindset, because the thing is, there is not a perfect answer for all the different contexts and solutions. So be confident in what you already know, continue to learn more, and just keep asking for feedback, right? Get feedback from your leadership, get feedback from your customers, and move forward from there. You got this.
Right. Golden words. Thanks, Sandy. Thanks, Bradley. Again, everyone, thank you for joining. And we'll look forward to all of you again for joining us on the 22nd. Bye, everyone. Happy weekend.
Thanks for hosting, AppEQ and Vincent.
Yes, have a good
Bye.
weekend.
Bye.